G'day mate, my name's Margie and I'm an Australian currently living in America. Today's video is going to be a breakdown of Bluey Season 3 episode Fairy Tale, which is the last one of this block of Season 3 that we have gotten, and I'm sure you can see from the time on this video, there is a lot, like just so much going on in this, from Bluey Easter eggs to Australia Easter eggs to references and Easter eggs from the 80s to animation Easter eggs to just... There's a lot. There's just so much. Usually my notes are about 2 pages, and for this one they're 4. So I'm going to try and get straight into it. If you're new here, hi, welcome. Hit that subscribe button and that little bell down below for more content. I do Australia versus America content as well as Bluey content. I plan on doing more Bluey content after this episode, I guess, or after this video. I'll be doing the Christmas stuff as well as breaking down Season 1, Season 2, an overall review, top 10s, all those kind of fun things. So hit the subscribe button down below. And don't forget to also check out my children's book, My Santa, Your Santa. Link for that in the description below. Okay, done. All the intro fun stuff. Grab yourself some pavlova and prosciutto, and let's just get straight into this. Fairy tale. Dad tells Bluey and Bingo a real-life fairy tale about growing up in a wild place called the 80s, about a boy who was cursed when he was mean to his little brother. You know, we were all sort of expecting something from this episode, and I can 100% tell you that it delivered. To the point where I'm literally wearing my Bluey family shirt because this episode is about the Healer family, and it's amazing. It was just hands down. This is number 1. It wins out of the whole season, number 1. Starting off with Bandit, he's telling a story to the girls. He's reading out Hansel and Gretel, and I love that they kind of reference the fact that fairy tales are really dark. They are really dark. Like, it was a wild ride. Yeah, because the Grimm fairy tales are pretty full on, realistically. And then we get Bingo saying, like, oh, did they happen for real life? Real life is one of our Bluey Easter eggs, I guess. It's one of the common sayings that we get here. And Bluey also says for real life too, as Bandit starts to tell her, like, you know, I'll tell you a fairy tale that is true about a mean brother who ends up good. It has a curse and even a princess in it. I love that he said the word princess in particular because that comes back around in multiple ways about who the princess is and the fact that they are an actual princess too. I also love as well that the person reading the title card for this is Bingo. I did expect it to be someone else. I thought maybe it might be Nana who would read this, but that's okay. We get Bingo reading the title card for Fairy Tale. Now we hear some amazing like 80s style music, so we know that we're going into a flashback. And then this opening scene here, straight away, I guessed where it was. It's far north Queensland, which is where I grew up in Australia. It's just iconic. I honestly thought it was one of the beaches like in my hometown or the island just across from it. But we find out that this is most likely South Mission Beach or possibly Fitzroy Island near Cairns, or like a little bit of mixture of the two of them. But again, we get some cool real life locations. Now, we find out that this is all set when Bandit is 10 years old, and just this one picture and saying gives us so much information. So our first one is the fact that if Bandit is 10 here in the 80s, we're going to assume that it's 1988, which is when the creator of Bluey, Joe Brumm, was also 10. So he's always said that he's based Bandit a lot on himself and his stories as being a father. So the assumption is that Bandit is also the same age as Joe. So they're 43 at the moment. So then, yeah, this is placed in 1988 during the 80s. And of course, the mullet. We get the mullet. I love the fact that they've referenced so many things from the episodes in Season 3 in this one episode as well. Like, you can just see that they were just laying down the tracks for us to follow. So we get to see young Bandit with a young mullet. We also get to see the fact that there are no helmets, and Bluey and Bingo are like, what do you mean? Yeah, there were no helmets in the 80s. This is actually a really interesting fact. So Australia was actually the first country in the world to make helmets, I guess, legal. Like, you had to wear a helmet while you were riding a bicycle, and this came into law in the 1990s. And indeed, before the 1990s, Australia was a wild place. We then get this awesome scene of all 3 brothers together, which is just so cool. But something we learn is that Uncle Rad is not the youngest brother like most of us thought. He's actually the oldest brother, making Bandit the middle child and Stripe the youngest. Which I think for a lot of people really blew their mind. Everyone I saw on like Reddit and on Facebook was talking about this and the fact that we just always assumed that Rad was the youngest because he wasn't married, but it was never officially stated where he actually kind of sat in the Bluey hierarchy, I guess. Now we get to find out a little bit more about how wild a place the 80s were, and we get this little montage scene talking about how trampolines had no nets, and this hilarious sort of animation of like the dog falling off the trampoline. This spoke to me so much. Like even the early 90s, which is when I grew up, very much this was just every day. Like the amount of people who had broken legs from these trampolines, I don't know, it was just like a rite of passage, really. We then get to see this amazing picture of all of this sort of 80s memorabilia or Easter eggs. So let's break it down. The first one we see, of course, is right dead in the center there on the undies, and that is He-Dog, or as we should say, He-Man is the reference there. I love the fact that this also comes into play again a little later in the episode. Another reference we get is the little like troll doll pencil toppers too. So we've got little dog troll versions of those, which is really awesome. And then you can see the name that's labeled on everything is Rich J. And I'm pretty sure that stands for Richard Jeffrey, who is the series director for Bluey. Next one we get is the idea of BMX seats were high. Yeah, BMX was huge in the 80s, and that was thanks to the movie BMX Bandits, which is set in Sydney. It was a movie in the 1983s, but BMX Bandits was so famous that it lasted like all the way through into the 90s as well. Like I always knew that if you were riding a bike, even if it wasn't a BMX, you would call yourself the BMX Bandits. And it has Nicole Kidman in it, so she's probably the most famous actress from this movie. But I love that they reference that. We then get to see cassette tapes, and we can actually kind of read the labels on some of these too. So we've got 3 different bands here. So the first one is most likely Bon Jovi and Bad Medicine, which is like that center tape there. And then I'm pretty sure the other one there on the left is Split Ends, which is a New Zealand band. And then the one on the right might be Tears for Fears, which is an English sort of pop rock band. And all of them were from the 80s. So again, super, super cool references to 80s music. Now, we then get a bit of reference to like Australian slang from the 80s from Bandit. So he's teasing his brother, and then he makes the quote, "Made you look, you dirty chook." So when I was watching this with my husband, I paused it almost straight away, and I looked at him. I was like, "Do you know what that means?" And he looked at me, he's like, "I've never heard that before in my life." So straight away, I was like, okay, it must have just been in Australia. And I looked it up, and it is official. It is an Australian typical statement that you say when you're tricking someone into looking at something else. We use this all the time as well as kids in the 90s. It's just a really funny saying. Chook means chicken as well, by the way. But I just love that they used this Aussie saying. Now, of course, the girls mentioned like, "Oh my gosh, you're actually teasing him. What the hell?" And I feel like this is a reference to the episode Teasing. We see that this is actually a part of Bandit's personality, I guess. He likes to tease people. But obviously, as he's gotten older, it's not as mean as what it was when he was younger. And I guess this is sort of the instant when he learnt, like, maybe teasing the way I am is wrong and it's mean. So I like that we're learning about how he learnt about teasing. Now, we then get into the curse part of this fairy tale, which is a jinx. So I'm sure almost anyone growing up knows what a jinx is. It's when 2 people say the word at the same time. So Bandit sort of explains that to the girls about, you know, the rules of it, how it works. And then according to his rules, you have 10 seconds to touch them. And I gotta say, the 10 seconds where they run through like the whole caravan park basically to the beach is really fast. Like they are running so quickly for 10 seconds, which I think might be a reference to the fact that they are dogs and dogs do run very fast. So I think that's sort of the first one. But we do have a few Easter eggs from each scene as well. Our first scene, we can see a fish and chip shop in the background, which we're about to see more details in a second. But yeah, fish and chip shops are pretty stereotypical for any sort of beach caravan place or anywhere near the beach, really. It is very much an Aussie staple in our beach culture. And then, of course, we see the bird there, which is a bin chicken, also known as an ibis, which we've seen in previous episodes as well. Now, we get to see inside the fish and chip shop. Again, a couple of Easter eggs and things happening here. So first of all, let's start off with the little dog who we saw in Bandits, like the 80s were a wild place flashback. So I love that they used an actual kid or an actual kid dog for that. You can see that he is playing on a computer game table. This most likely is the Space Invaders table from the 80s. You can sort of see the animation on it, and we're going to see a little bit close up later on. And then you can see the kid's dad there. He's wearing the typical Australian zinc. The Australian sun's real, man. Like, sun cancer is a real problem in Australia. But one of the funnest things about it is the fact that you can put on coloured zinc, and it helps protect your face from sun cancer. Now, more importantly, what he's wearing and drinking, I think, is fabulous. So the first one, of course, he's wearing just Speedos. So he's not wearing underwear. These are male swimming apparel, I guess you would say. But these are very stereotypical for the 80s, the color of them, everything like that. He's wearing thongs, also known as flip-flops in other countries. I love that you can tell that he's drinking a beer as well because he's got the stubby holder around it, or beer koozie, as you would also say in America. So again, a real sort of flashback to the fact that it was the 80s and you used to be able to drink kind of anywhere in Australia, but you can't now. You then see them running past what ends up being like their beach caravan apartment. There's not a lot going on in front of their apartment. You can sort of see a crab pot, but the one behind them, you can see sort of like an older dog and he's drinking a Papal drink. Hands down, when you zoom in, this is a can of Pasito. This is an Australian soft drink. It is a passion fruit drink, which I found is not as common in other countries that I've lived in, which is quite sad because it is delicious. Pasito is hands down my favorite soft drink. Now, as they're running through another guy's camper trailer, there's not a lot going on here realistically, except for, you know, like the old school radio, everything like that. Again, he's also drinking a beer and a stubby holder. But I feel like maybe his hat is a reference to something. I'm not quite sure. If you have any idea, let me know in the comments down below. Then you see them run through all the coconuts, they get down to the beach, and then Rad says the word skint, which I didn't really quite understand this, to be honest. For me, the word skint means someone who has like no money or is poor. I don't remember saying this with Jinx as a kid, but I guess in this case, maybe the creators remembered this from when they were kids in the 80s. So we learned that if he says that, you know, you can never speak again. And then as Bandit's telling us about like how to break the curse, we see into like the corner store that's there. And what a surprise, there is so much in this one picture yet again. So let's break it down all the way left to right. At the top there, we've got the exit sign, which is a dog, which is really funny. Then moving across behind the counter is what I'm assuming are cigarettes on display. This was, of course, very normal in Australia in the 80s. Since about 2005, though, the regulations in Australia changed. You can't display cigarettes anywhere in Australia. Like, they have to actually be hidden. That's part of our laws to help stop smoking. So again, that's kind of a very 80s thing to see. When you look down, you can see all these lollies only for 5 cents. Super, super cheap. But right at the bottom of those lollies there is our long dog for this episode, a little pink one. So that's great. We've got our Bluey Easter egg for this one. Then as we move across, we see the boys are playing on a video game, and hands down, this video game is definitely Double Dragon. It was really popular in the 80s, and we get to see a bit more of a close-up of it in a second. As we move across, I love it. We get like a kangaroo kind of exercising in the back. And then if we look at the magazines, we've got maybe one of the coolest, I think, animation / comic book Easter eggs, because if you look right down the bottom there, we have a dog version of Superman issue #1, and that is so cool. I think it's just absolutely amazing that they've done that. Another thing in the magazines I think that maybe they might be referencing is Olivia Newton-John. So the dog in the top left corner, she's sort of got like that 80s workout gear on. Olivia Newton-John is a famous Australian actress, and I think best known for her song Let's Get Physical. So I think that might be a little bit of a reference to that. But if you've got any other references from the other magazines, again, let me know down below. So we then learn, like, to break the curse, someone has to say your name. As we learn this, we can see a little bit more details of the Double Dragon game. And again, the characters look almost identical to the ones from Double Dragon, but they are dogs instead of humans. Now we then get to see Stripe starting to tease Bandit, which I think is really funny. And he calls him Banditums. I feel like Diddums is definitely a reference to what Bandit's name was in the episode Kids when they're at the supermarket, and that's what Bluey has decided that his name is Diddums. So I love that little callback to an earlier season. Now the girls sort of get to find out what does happen if you speak and if you say your name, and Bandit just whispers it to them. So we never find out in the show what actually happens, but it's bad enough that, you know, Bingo freaks out and she's like, that's terrible. For me, I remember it was like either you got punched or you got like an arm burn if you said the name. So I'm assuming that's what he's telling them in a whisper. So then we go back to the fish and chip shop again and we get to see 80s Nana. It's fantastic. She has a perm. I curled my hair in honor of 80s Nana. So I love that we get to see this. It's the same voice actor for her as well. It's something I want to mention too. So she has the same voice actor as does Bandit. And I'm assuming Stripe and Rad, but they're not actually credited, so I don't really know. It could be child actors maybe voicing them for this one. But Bandit and Nana, same voice actors. And then as we pan out to the outside and we get to see them eating their fish and chips, we get a sneak peek at Bob, and at first I was like, oh, please don't let this be all that we see of him. We've been waiting all season to find out what's going on with him. Please, please, please don't let this be it. But as we move to the next scene, it's not with Bob, it's back with Nana again, and she references, mini cereals that I feel were really popular in the 80s and 90s. They're like the Kellogg's brand. They would come in, I think it was like an 8-pack from memory. I remember as a kid, we used to always take these with us when we were on holidays and we'd snack on them. And if you zoom in on her packet, I'm pretty sure it's meant to be Cocoa Pops, but instead of the monkey, which is what we grew up seeing in Australia, it's got a kangaroo on it instead. So that's really funny. Very Aussie referenced there. And then we see Nana chasing Bandit with her thongs about to hit him. And I don't know, I think it's really interesting that at this point here, Bandit kind of has this conversation with the girls. Like, they're like, oh, Nana was a bit mean. He's like, yeah, it's the 80s. Mums are allowed to be mean. And I think it's kind of referencing the fact that, parenting expectations in the 80s versus 2020s were very, very different. It's 40 years, so a lot has changed. And he really kind of drives this home when we see Bob next by saying that dads weren't much help either. Before I break all this down, I just want to kind of talk about that one line. So I really think that this could kind of explain why Bandit is such an involved parent in his girls' lives. Like, why he makes so much effort with them all the time. Because obviously to him, he didn't see his dad as ever being very involved. He didn't think that he helped out much. He wasn't very hands-on. So I think this might be kind of explaining to us also maybe why Bandit and his dad don't get along, possibly. And maybe that's why we haven't seen Bob. I don't know. But I do also think, again, that this also references Stripe's parenting behavior that we saw in the previous episode, Facey Talk, where he is also not so hands-on and is wanting to sort of please people all the time. And I guess from being the little brother and maybe being in this situation with his dad, that's what he's replicated. So I don't know. Look, it's a lot to get into, I realize, but I do think it's really interesting that we find out that little bit more extra information about Bob's parenting style. Now, okay, to break down the actual picture though, let's go through it. So we see the two boys with sticks and we see Stripe there poking at the jellyfish, which is hands down a reference to the episode Beach from season 1 when Bluey is poking the jellyfish as well. We then get to sort of see Granddad Bob there, and in case you're wondering what he's doing, so what he's holding is called a yabby pump, and in the bucket in the back you can see he's got a few yabbies in there. Yabbies are what we call crayfish in Australia. They can come as saltwater or freshwater ones, and basically you use that pump to pull them up out of the ground. So I guess you could say he's fishing, but that's what he's doing in case you're wondering. Now we also see him go through a bunch of names because he just forgot what Bandits was. So he's like Stripe, Rad, Gerald. Who's Gerald? Who is this Gerald person? Is this an unknown child that we don't know about? Is this the reason why we don't see Bob? Did he have a kid before Nana and that's why he's never there for Christmas because he's with that family? Or look, there's a bunch of theories that we could go down the hole here. Gerald could also be the name of a pet, perhaps, that they have and they just don't have the pet here. Maybe it's a pet cat. So again, just maybe a funny reference to who is Gerald? Who do you think Gerald is? Let me know down below. Now, the next line that Bob says is, well, you're dreaming, mate. You're dreaming, or tell him he's dreaming, is a very classic Australian 80s phrase to the point where it actually became, I think, even more famous from the movie The Castle, which is like an iconic Australian 80s movie.
450.
For jousting, Sticks. Tell him he's dreaming.
Want me to say your name so you can talk again? Well, you're dreaming, mate.
So I love that they've referenced that one phrase because, I mean, we still sort of say it these days as well, but it's kind of like as a joke, but it's straight away you hear it and you know it's Aussie. Now, the next thing I want to point out, of course, is the voice actor for Granddad Bob in this. It is not the voice actor that we saw in the episode Grannies. So in Grannies, it was Ian McFadden instead, but we know that he didn't come back for other voice acting opportunities, I guess, because of COVID restrictions in Australia. So it's interesting that out of all the characters, only really Granddad Bob has gotten a younger voice actor for this episode, and that is Sam Simmons, who is an Australian comedian. He's absolutely hilarious and also happened to be in Peppa Pig. I know Bluey gets a lot of like comparisons to Peppa Pig a lot and how much better it is. But I think it is funny to mention that Sam Simmons was the Wallaby in Peppa Pig, and now he's also in Bluey too. Now, the only other question we have is what happened to Bob's ears? Because when we see Bob and Granny, he's missing a chunk of his ear, but he's got 2 full ears here. So that's another theory that we've got to work on, is what happened to his ears. Now, we move on to see that Nana's sort of having a bit of a sit-down talk with Bandit, telling him, you've got to realize you were being mean to him. We then get a reference to skateboarding terminology with tic-tac, which is a type of skateboarding move. And Bandit kind of realizing that, yeah, Nana's right, he was being mean. I love that he references her perm. Not about her perm, but about me. I love Nana's perm. I think it's so classic, and it's absolutely the 80s hairstyle. I think it's fantastic that they included that in there. We then get to see the next morning, Bandit's walking to the shower block, and there's sort of two things in this. One is the car behind him. Now, at first you might think, oh, what about it? Look, they don't put numbers in this show for nothing. So that number plate specifically, one, isn't an Aussie number plate. It's actually a Japanese number plate. So one of the animators here is obviously a massive fan of Japanese manga, because that is the license plate for Takumi, which is a Japanese street racing manga series called Initial D. And that's almost the exact same car, and that is the number plate from it as well. So a weird random reference to Japanese manga and animation too. Now, the other thing I want to point out here, of course, is his hat. It's a Legionnaire's hat. This is worn by kids all the time in Australia, again, because of sun cancer. No hat, no play. That is the rule in Australia growing up as a kid, and this protects your ears and the back of your neck, which always get sunburnt. And of course, we have the classic 80s kind of coloring on it too. Now, we find out, Stripe gets stuck in the prickles. I like that just in the previous episode, Ragdoll, Bandit got stuck in the prickles as they were moving to the car. So again, kind of like a mini reference to the previous episode, but I feel like, again, it's sort of like just setting up that idea for each episode following on from it. We see that Bandit helps him out by throwing the hat on the ground. It's really kind, but, Stripe still doesn't say his name. And then, because, there's meant to be a princess in this, and Bandit's like, oh, then the princess rocked up. And, in my heart, I was like, is it going to be Chile? Because, they met in London. I was like, oh, but it'd be so weird if it was someone else. And so we pan back, and oh my goodness, it was Chili. You can just tell from the coloring on her face, obviously. I lost it when I saw this. I was just so excited. Obviously, there's a lot to break down with what she's wearing. One other little mini Easter egg is in the toilet block. You see the little boys sign, and it's a dog. Just wanted to give that a quick shout out. But of course, Chili's costume. It's absolutely fantastic. She is wearing the She-Ra costume from that time, the Princess of Power. So again, I love it. We saw the He-Dog or He-Man in the undies earlier on in the episode, and now we get to see the She-Ra version. So I love that they show her in that. Now, Bandit says that, yeah, it's Mum here, and then we come back into the real time and we see Mum being like, don't listen to him, it wasn't me. And I was like, no, what do you mean? It has to be her. Bandit's pretty convinced it was too. And we get, a little bit of information. She says that they used to go to that caravan park when she was a kid, but she's got no memory of it happening. And I feel like, that's fine. We don't remember a lot of things when we're kids. But I do think that this might be the reason that we have that conversation in the episode The Show, where Chili says that there's a bit of a dispute as to how they met, but according to her, they met at a party in London. Maybe this is the dispute. Bandit's convinced that he met her when he was 10 years old, but Chili is like, nah, we met at a party in London. So I love that we find out, again, something from seasons back, that this is what the dispute is about. Now, again, I love that we get the reference to the fact that everyone wrote their names on everything, and that's how she knew how to say his name and break his curse. And we get this beautiful picture of the night sky saying, do you believe in fairy tales? And again, we get to see that beautiful, loving kind of moment between Bandit and Chili, and just absolute couple goals. And it just matches up perfectly with a parallel for them flicking to the next scene of them when they're kids and saying here you go, thanks. And then just this amazing part where it's see you later from Chili, and she runs off like a princess holding her sword. And then you just get this look at Bandit being like, yeah, see you later. And just the emotions from this, I almost, I teared up at this point. I was just like, that was amazing. He is going to see her later because they're going to get together because it's a fairy tale. This was, for me, this was my crying moment for this season. I was just like, that is so beautiful. And I 100% think that this is a reference and parallel to the episode Camping, where Bluey and Jean-Luc meet when they're little kids. And then we see in that episode them growing up and meeting again later on as teenagers. So maybe Bluey does end up with Jean-Luc, and maybe this episode is setting up that idea. I know, I think it's just absolutely amazing and incredible. Overall, number 1, 10 out of 10. Hands down, this episode wins this part of the season for me easily. I love that they tried out the idea of showing the kids at the age of 10, and I'm really curious as to whether they're thinking of maybe doing like a spin-off because of this, or if they're also trying out to see if it's okay for them to age the kids up. Because I mean, we had birthdays this season, they all aged up a year, and I won't lie, I love this idea. I think it's a great idea to show them all aging up as they get older as well, just like you would in a regular family sitcom, which is what Bluey was supposed to be initially before it became an animated series. So I love this idea. I love the idea of them aging the characters up, or at least us getting a spin-off or flashbacks. I think it's fantastic. So we had so much going on in this episode. What did you think about it? Number 1, who do you think Gerald is? Number 2, do you think that it was Chili here in the flashback scenes, or do you think maybe it was someone else? And 3, did this make you cry like it made me cry? Because I just thought it was absolutely incredible and fantastic. So please let me know in those comments down below what you think. Don't forget to hit that massive like button as well. I super duper appreciate it. I've had so much fun breaking down this season with you guys. It's been an absolute blast for me. As well as thank you so much for helping my channel grow. I wanted to do something like this and create content on YouTube, and Bluey is my passion, and I'm really glad that you guys are enjoying this stuff as well. I love hearing about it in the comments below. It really, really makes my day. So again, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the bell as well, because I plan on doing Christmas Bluey content. I will break down those 2 Christmas episodes as well, so we have something to see at Christmas, just in case they don't release a Christmas episode. But I think they're going to. Their Instagram is kind of like hinting at it every day about something to do with Christmas and bells and little tiny shorts. I really, really think that they're going to release an episode on Christmas. Or at least that's my Christmas wish anyway. Otherwise, I'll be posting those videos next week for the Christmas breakdowns. I hope you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I will see you in another video. Mwah! Bye!